Okay, so yeah, welcome, obviously, everybody. And I think, as you know, today, these sessions are a little bit of a free-for-all because it's a chance just to say hi and connect. But I do try and, I guess, have some sort of theme or flavor running through it. And today, if I just share my screen for a second, where's it gone? There we go. Today's theme, I guess, is about reluctance or hesitancy. And a couple of definitions: lack of willingness or eagerness to do something, and hesitancy is, I guess, slowness in acting. The reason, I guess, I picked this really is twofold. One is it's a real trend or feeling that I've been picking up, I guess, in a lot of our clients and a lot of people that I talk to, that, we are heading back, but we're certainly not going whee, and leaping back, that there is just that kind of reluctance. And I read in one, I think it was the Guardian newspaper, that said that reluctance is the #1 issue that organisations in the UK are facing, that they're getting people back into the office now, but as I say, really, really reluctantly. And so I thought it was an interesting topic. Then I guess I thought about me. And I mean, I had to go into the city a couple of weeks ago, and I mean, heavens, I had to get on the bus. And that really did make me kind of, stop and think. So I sort of hesitated a bit, I procrastinated, I thought about it, I delayed. I mean, I went in the end and I had a mask on and so forth, but I really didn't feel, all that comfortable, I guess, during the entire, process. And I also got asked out to dinner, chance to meet some friends that I hadn't spoken to or seen, I guess, really since the beginning of COVID. And again, that involved an Uber ride. And as I got into the Uber, I thought, this is probably not their first pickup during the day. So, what's floating around and everything. I went, I wore a mask, he picked me up afterwards, and I'm here. So I was reluctant, I was hesitant, but as it turned out, it was fine. And I think that's probably what a lot of us are, picking up. So what I thought we'd do today, and we've got a good group, so is we'll do our normal breakout rooms. Whoops. And what I'd like you to do is this, is really three things, is talk about reluctance. I've lost a slide, never mind. Two questions I'd like to pose when you go into a breakout room. The first question is, what's your experience with reluctance and hesitancy? It could be a personal experience like me in the Uber, or it could be, a client, a workshop that you ran or whatever. So what's your experience with reluctance and hesitancy? And the second question is, what can we do about it? If it is there, and it's getting in the way, what can we do about it? Now, when you get into your breakout rooms, I'd love you to nominate one person. So when we tumble back in as a big group, one person from each of the subgroups can share in particular, what can we do about reluctance and hesitancy? Okay, so we'll do about 15 minutes in the breakout rooms, have a good chat, share, as I say, your experience and what can we do about it. So I will see you soon. Hey, so we had a great chat. So I'm hoping everybody else did. Who's now? I don't know how we'll manage this, but I guess who's so excited about what they've got to share that they can't wait to be, they've got to be first. So who's jumping up and down? Steph.
I was like, you know, it's going to be me, Michael. I'm always wanting to talk. So we had 4 people in our breakout room. And so we talked about the different kind of experiences with reluctance. So I'll just go over those first. Lydia had a situation where she was talking to a mother about her son wanting to do his homework or not wanting to do his homework when he got home from school. So there was that reluctance there to really encourage her son, and her son reluctant to do the homework when his mother was encouraging him. And the way she dealt with that was simply shining some light on empathy, by saying, when you get home from work, what do you like to do when you get home? She said, well, I like to relax. And she said, so why are you expecting your son to be better than you? Why are you expecting your son to do things that you don't do? And so that also helped her go, you're so right. We had another case of reluctance in terms the experience was a shoemaker. So Paul had a shoemaker very close to him who made the best shoes by custom measuring and everything. And he was told by his wife, you're going to have to prepare for a life after this shoemaker because he won't be working forever. And so there was reluctance as to where he would go next to buy shoes, considering the only place he found that was great was, of course, New Zealand. And so there was that reluctance there. And the way that Paul dealt with that was by changing perspective. So having a look at it from a different foot or a different angle, which helped him deal with that reluctance. And then the last one from Christine was the reluctance to go out after COVID. So once restrictions had eased, and even though before COVID, she was a very social, interactive, energizing bunny, there was that reluctance to go out and do that again after so long being confined in a space or having all these restrictions. And so the dealing with the reluctance there was, again, understanding where you wanted to keep certain restrictions for yourself that made you feel comfortable in tackling that new change or going forward with that and pushing through that reluctance. So that is the sum up. I was very much just agreeing because I'm the same. If I'm reluctant, it's because I don't want to do it. Why don't I want to do it? I need to unpack that more. And as you say, take a step back and look at the bigger picture or just change the perspective.
Okay, thanks, Steph.
No worries.
Okay, and applause from Lydia. Well done. All right, who's jumping up and down to go next?
Okay.
Yes, Lucy.
So Michael was in that group, and in the last 3 seconds, I think I got nominated unexpectedly to be the speaker, so which I'm happy to do. So we had a few themes that we looked at. We started off by talking about, I guess, you know, reluctance and hesitancy as opposed to other things like resistance. Which was a discussion point in our group because obviously resistance in change management and where do they fit. I think it became clear as we kept on talking was that resistance, you might find that first and it's a harder thing you're up against, and reluctance is something that maybe comes after you've gotten through some resistance. So we had an interesting talk about that, and that was helpful just in drawing out kind of what we were actually talking about. We also talked about there was an example about a multiplicity really of reluctance, like layer upon layer of things that cause reluctance, and how then more complex that makes that, because you're not dealing with just really one reluctance, you're dealing maybe with a couple that all are interrelated to stop you from doing something, and that can then make it more complex. We also talked about, I guess we had people from all different places. So we talked about different cultures and specifically in relation to return to office and how that's different in different places, and how there's a reluctance in some places that's, for us in Melbourne, that's decreased over time as we've had multiple attempts at returning. So we have faced reluctance, but it's decreased the more that we've kind of addressed it, and the COVID risk is obviously decreased as well. But then we also had, Zena was saying in the Philippines, you know, that's now an expected, hybrid work is something that's expected. So the resistance and reluctance was more about letting people continue to do some work from home. So that was also very interesting. We talked about, is there an overlay with this onto the HBDI? Michael said there's not at this point any evidence that's been collected, but an interesting consideration. And we really landed in the same place as the last group, you know, really needing to understand and draw out what the reasons are for the reluctance. And I think that point about empathy also, we didn't explicitly say that, but I think that's a really good one to actually then try and address it. So if anyone else wants to share anything from our group, that's a bit of a summary of where we went on our journey.
You know, thanks, Lucy. I just like to get Sten, did you had a comment about Singapore and the difference between reluctance and hesitancy that I thought was interesting.
Well, my comment about the difference is probably not necessarily Singapore specific, but the way I in discussions look at reluctance and hesitancy in working with the HR department is that they look at reluctance more as an internal motivational issue. So the lack or eagerness to do something is a personal internal issue, if you like, and is not an organizational issue. Whereas hesitancy is an organizational issue, whereby the organization needs to provide the psychological safe environment for people to act and decide to do something. So i.e. not be reluctant to get feedback, not be reluctant to be criticized for their decisions, providing them also with enough information to make decisions and act upon things. So I look at those two that Michael put up in the reluctant and hesitancy as one being an internal issue or a personal issue, and the second one being more of an organizational issue. So I look at them very differently. I would say if I were to discuss those, I look at them as two very different issues. And resistance, as we talked about in our group, can be a combination of both. You know, one can be I'm not reluctant, and therefore I'm resistant, or the psychological safety in the organizational there, so I'm resistant. So that one probably overlaps both of those.
Yep. No, thanks for that. I just found that separation, as you say, of hesitancy being perhaps a organizational issue more than reluctance, which is a personal one, is quite really useful. So thank you. All right, who's next? We had quite a few groups.
I'll go.
Yeah,
okay.
Jess.
Okay.
No, sorry, Chris, you go.
Go for it, Jess.
Okay.
You put your hand up.
Like in class. Okay, so I was in the group. I was with Amy, Daryl, and Julie, and so we discussed hesitancy. So Amy, for starters, she is very adventurous and used to go on overseas trips a lot. She found that after COVID there was that bit of reluctance to kind of book the next holiday, but she decided to do a domestic trip to Uluru. And even though she had a few little stumbles along the way with flights getting cancelled and all signs probably pointing not to go, she decided to go anyway, and she had an amazing time. And so that was her overcoming that. Daryl, he said that it was he found a bit of reluctance with people returning face-to-face at work. However, he found it was a great opportunity to put a bit of a creative spin on it and to try some different things, whether, working from home some days, taking it down to a 4-day work week and just having a little bit more flexibility. So we did find that there was a positive spin to the reluctance of people, not wanting to return to face-to-face. Julie, as well, she found getting people together as well. They've had a bit of trouble with, getting people together. She did go out to an event, and there was a, room that had like a music event in it, and just those large crowds of people not wearing masks. She did find that she was a little bit hesitant with that, and I guess that feeling of being a little bit uncomfortable, still returning to those, areas with really large crowds, especially when people aren't wearing masks or, following the safety precautions. On the positive though, Julie did start her own business, which is going really well. And it's also given her time to do some online courses and to, better her learning. Also with her business, she's managed to pick up a couple global clients from being online, which is awesome as well. So that was great. And I guess, what we discussed for overcoming it is just really just being flexible and creative, trying new things, see what works, see what doesn't. having that work-life balance as well is really important, and we think that that's a real positive that's come out of this, if there's, you know, a silver lining. And also, you know, when you're going out, wearing masks and just being health conscious, so you can still do the things that you want to do while obviously still being, you know, following the safety precautions and still making sure that you're doing the right thing. So that's us.
Excellent. Thanks, Jess. Yeah, and some
Thanks.
lovely examples there, and especially, I guess, of Julie's, that, you know, in the middle of all this, opportunity as well. So, yeah, well done. Chris, were you-
Excellent. Thank you. Yep. So we had 4 people in our group. Sarah, she had to leave because she had another meeting. So one of the challenges, right? I like what how Stin separated between the reluctance and hesitancy. I mean, that's a good perspective to look at it. So one of them had a challenge in the school management. Because there's a challenge in the school management, you're reluctant to do anything because that's the leadership. They are not deciding. So that's one of the challenges why they did that. And Sri Lok from Bangkok, she gave extensive reasons why she was hesitant to go on a conference with the conflicting priorities that she was trying to dabble with. So that aligns with how Stin mentioned that it's a personal decision versus the corporate decision. But for me, I see reluctance and also the willingness to do as a 2 paradigm, because when I was studying in China, they have the word for losing the face. I don't know what the actual word in Chinese for losing the face. The students wouldn't ask questions to the lecturer. They would be hesitant or reluctant to ask the question. They would rather do it on a one-on-one. They wouldn't ask publicly. So if I'm coaching a different cultural group, and I have to be mindful of the cultural nuances, and some people may not come up and say, the loudest is, in my books, is not always the brightest. Sometimes you have the quiet people have so much of great ideas, and it's, as a coach, as a leader, for me to go and tap into those areas of the quiet rooms of the meeting, which is good. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks, Chris. You brought back one memory for me. I remember in the very distant past when I went to Singapore and ran my first ever workshop in Singapore. And yeah, nobody said anything. Nobody asked me anything. And by lunchtime, I was totally distraught because I thought, what's going on here? And luckily, I was able to phone a friend who reminded me that yes, just different. Yeah. So yeah, great example. Okay, do we have another group?
I'll go, Michael.
Yes, Stephanie.
Hi, our group was really, geographically dispersed in the sense we sort of went from Auckland to Perth and everything across the middle. And I think that range was also reflected in our sort of perspectives about reluctance. So everything from a reluctance to sort of buy into the narrative of COVID and, a sort of more pro-choice view to things, and through to looking at the big lockdowns in Melbourne and the impact that had on reluctance as a comparison for the different experiences across the group. So there was some talk, it sort of focused around the reluctance to return to the office, some talk about the sort of an unconscious return to habits. So we create habits during the long lockdowns, and there's this sort of falling back into those habits that happen. And then there's also been the creation of a sort of fear and cautiousness and a mistrust. And some people talked about the fact that's been conditioned rather than chosen. And then there was the reflection that you've got at the workplace, you've got the full spectrum, just like the spectrum we had in our group. You've got those people who are highly reluctant to return to work, and those people who are busting at the edges to return to work. So, that full range of people that are there. And then we also talked about the fact that is it reluctance or is it reassessing your choices? And that led us, reassessing as in, I don't have to go into the office every day. I don't have to commute an hour and a half every day. And that, of course, led into the challenges with recruitment and candidates' reluctance to be in the office and wanting to have a lot of choice about flexibility. And then we sort of led into talking about what do we do and what do we try to do with some of this stuff, and discuss the fact that workplaces are starting to set expectations to help people, sort of bridge that reluctance a little bit. And then we started to talk about the fact that it's like you got to challenge your own habits sometimes, a bit like challenging your thinking styles or practicing your thinking styles. You've got to go into those spaces and encourage other people to go into those spaces to stretch. And so we talked about, we started to talk about how could you challenge yourself or challenge others to stretch out of those habits that we started talking about. That was it. Thanks. Thanks, group.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. All right, is there anybody else? Have we covered everybody, or?
Michael, maybe I can just add a little bit, because sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name who just spoke. We talked about China, and I'm from Singapore,
Chris,
and
yep.
it came up in my group. I mentioned that cultural things and how people speak, but what I just wanted to separate how I got to this personal and organizational thing is in advising clients that how the term quiet quitting probably people have heard about, and so my clients were saying, how do we deal with that? What can we do about it? And so we came to this after a number of discussions and clients. I came to this realization that, okay, the way to attack it is you attack it first at an organizational level and say, providing that we provide all the right basis and structure for people to work well, i.e. psychological safety, giving them all the information, allowing them to have feedback anonymously, etc. That we can do from an organizational level, and we can build that. We have to be responsible for that. Then when it gets to the individual level, then it's up to the individual, but then it's a one-on-one. So when you look at your employee base as a whole, you can't say this is a good guy, that's a bad guy, or this guy needs attention and that guy doesn't need attention. So we basically say attack it from the organizational level first, make sure everything is in order there. And if then there are people that don't function optimally, then you approach those individually, and you go into, so why are you reluctant to take action? Is that a personal thing? What's holding you back? What's your concern? And you attack that individually, rather than, especially in this whole quiet quitting, great resignation question mark, where it originally all came from was, what do we do? How do we approach this? What is the solution? And so the solution was to tackle it in two stages. One, ensure the organization is in order, and two, then you go to the personal level. So that's where that came from.
Okay, thanks, Dean. That's, interesting. All right. Kerry.
Hello. I've just been dogged in by one of my lovely teammates. So we had Ainsley, Elaine and Carol Ann and myself, and our conversation was much similar to you guys, but we were not getting so much into an experience as such, but just some of the trends that we had been seeing. And we were noting that we had a lot of people saying they were going to come along to things that weren't coming, and then what was their reluctance or hesitancy to actually follow through and get there. And we're talking about how we were responding, and we were a couple of different styles in there, but how some of us were making lists and trying to get ourselves a bit more organized, rather than going into our general red and yellow up there and out and such things. But then we were talking about how do we get about it, and we were really thinking it was really about what's in it for each individual, because we're all coming at it from such different spaces. And the accountability piece of if somebody's saying they're going to get there, what is it that is holding them back, but having some accountability to do that. And it really comes down to some of the things that you talked about, that we've created new habits. We've got different comfort zones. Those of us that were really used to being out in front of people are now sort of going, oh, hang on a minute, I've got to get dressed up, and I've got to, it's so much effort to get out. But we just need to bring people as Sten, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, sorry, but that safe space, to create a space where people are really comfortable to come and share what they're doing. And I think the question is a big one that takes a bit more than 15 minutes to get to the bottom of, for sure.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thanks, Kerry. All right. Anybody else want to? All right. If you've got a comment, obviously just whack it in the chat. What I'll do, I guess, to try and summarize this, which I think has been a fabulous discussion, so thank you for that, is I've just been playing around with, I guess, obviously these two words, but also the whole brain model to see how it all fits. Now, this has little or no validity at all, so it's really just me trying to make sense of it all. And I've just called it moving towards, acceptance. So, the top line, there's an ending, there's the past, there's then in between and the uncertainty, and then, the future and the new beginnings. And I guess what I found is that, productivity often disappears as we get, more concerned, I guess, with ourselves and things. So that's really the dip. What I've been trying to do, though, is to, say, I guess, do the demands that it places on us change during the process? And so I try to describe the process, as you say, from, denial to shock and resistance, to avoidance, to anger, perhaps to some reconsideration, etc. And, should we be, I guess, mindful of the whole brain model as we try and move ourselves and people, through this process? What I'll do is we'll send this out after the webinar for you, so you can have a look at it and play around with it. The next thing, obviously, I started to do was to say, okay, let's do a think about. Let's think about overcoming and what are the different concerns. And I don't think this is a complete list by any means, but I think we've been talking a little bit about these, and how the concerns from the different quadrants obviously, vary, and how, when I started to do this, I realized that although I have very strong preferences in the yellow, I still have concerns, in the blue and the green. So I'm not, it was just interesting for me. And the last one, I guess, I looked at, which, and I don't know whether this is right, because I've moved the red and the green quadrants around. What I found was that for me, the blue and the red quadrants tend to focus more on the past, and the yellow and the green more on the future. I don't know whether that resonates with anybody, but so I thought, oh, that's not how the whole brain model usually plays out, but there we go. So I'll put those, as I say, in when we do the email end of this week or beginning of next week, as we always do, I'll attach those for you. So all I can say is thank you, because that for me, that was I wasn't reluctant or hesitant to talk about reluctance or hesitancy, but I didn't know how it would go. But I think it's been a fabulous discussion. So thank you, one and all. If you want to hang on the line and have a chat, by all means do so. And we'll see you all soon.